Vitharn, the Fall. A history of Keep Vitharn and its count during the second generation of rule. Chapter 1, in which the Keep Vitharn is established and passes from the first generation of rule to the second. Count Vitharn, who built and appointed his keep from the mud of dementia, gathered to himself any who would pledge themselves as liege. Nearby tribes of fanatics were united as vassals to protect his lands and line, and thus the Count lived out his days in the Isles. He and his Countess Maewyn bore Sarin and Waela, the first son and daughter of Vitharn. Sarin's mother and father believed that with proper political influence, Sarin could certainly usurp sheogorath and carry the Shiveringisles into a prosperous age. For his part, Count Vitharn refused even to acknowledge sheogorath, thinking himself and his heirs irrefutable rulers of the Isles. This, of course, amused the mad god to no end, and so he allowed the marriage of Sarin to sheogorath, daughter of an Argonian midwife, who believed that the mortal sphere would afford her daughter nothing but hatred and oppression. Sheogorath was as excellent a countess to Sarin as any in the Isles could ask for, wanting nothing but to bring pride and honor to her adopted house and court. For years her mind was untouched, even living as she did in the heart of dementia. Alas, none may reside too long in the Isles without the blessing of Lord sheogorath, and so sheogorath was finally pushed to the brink by the infidelity of her husband, the Count. Sarin was obsessively nepotistic, and distrustful of anyone with whom he shared no blood relation, including his bride. Though sheogorath bore a son by the Count, who disappeared from the Isles in his 20th year, it is known that the two shared their bed with decreasing frequency as Sarin's paranoia grew, and he found himself in the arms of his birth sister, Waela, who bore of their incestuous affair their heir apparent, Cesrian. There are those of us who remember personally the reign of Cesrian and his contribution to the fall of Vitharn. Chapter 2, in which the birth of Count Cesrian heralds a glorious, bloody and brief age for Vitharn. Violent-natured and quick of temper, Cesrian sought enemies where there were none. His early days on the seat of Vitharn saw the extermination of every tribe of man, mer, or beast within sight of the keep, until none were left. During his brief reign, much of the southeastern coastline of Dementia was unsafe to travel, littered with the corpses of trespassers in the lands of Vitharn, staked to trees as territorial markers. Besides his sadistic temper, Count Cesrian of Vitharn was known also for his slow wit and ailing health. Indeed, Cesrian was born with legs that seemed mismatched in length, and breathed with a laborious rasp. As a youth, tutors were hard-pressed to school the dull boy. Midwives and nurses surrounded him, attending his every ailment with balms and vapors from every corner of the Isles. But when he came of age, he sent them away, often becoming violent in their dismissal. Perhaps showing the influence of his father, Cesrian became increasingly introverted, allowing only a select few courtiers in his presence. He was seen in public only when organizing his Vassal Fanatics for yet another raid on the countryside, atypically adhering to the desperate counsel of his advisors. Cesrian paused in his plundering to take a wife and ensure the continuation of Vitharn's noble line. The increasingly ill Count chose a vibrant peasant woman as his betrothed, from a heretic commune in the wilds of Mania. Indeed, Countess Jadine could not have been any more his opposite. Vassal Fanatics, long loyal to their ancestral agreement with Count Vitharn, were inflamed by this heresy, and tensions grew as the health of Cesrian finally failed, and his young son, Cirian, ascended the throne of Vitharn. Chapter 3, in which conflict besets Vitharn, and the irenic Count Cirian is overwhelmed. Young Count Cirian had scarcely been seen in public before his hasty coronation in the bailey of Vitharn Keep. Some say he still bore bruises from beatings at the feeble hand of his father during his final hours during the ceremony. Had Cirion been old enough to govern, his gentle, reserved demeanor may have been enough to ease the seething tension among the vassal tribe. But his mother, Countess Jadine, was forced to assume many of the duties her husband had so long ignored. By all accounts, Jadine was a fit countess, loved by her people. But the leaders of the Vassal Fanatics could not contain indefinitely their personal sentiments of outrage at her manic heritage. Despite her exceedingly tactful attempts at diplomacy, the animosity against her was deep-seated and grew over the years. It is perhaps admirable that the vassals remained true to the oaths so long. When Cirion finally came of age to rule, the sheepish boy count tried in earnest to ascend gracefully, but his fear of the world was so great that even the shadow of a passing bird would startle him visibly. He was all but unable to address the people publicly, and when he attempted to placate the vassals, still outraged by his mother's heritage, he could scarcely contain his fright, and some say that he even soiled himself before fleeing the throne chamber, certain as the march of fate. The tolerance of the Vassal Fanatics snapped, and warriors encircled Vitharn. The Count's personal guards were ill-suited to repel the attack, and the siege lasted a single day. Since the day of that battle, no living soul has wandered away from Vitharn. Local myth tells of a tireless struggle between the spirits of the fanatic vassals and Vitharn's meager defenders, damned by the treachery of fanatics and the cowardice of Cirion to replay their final moments in perpetuity.